Hey, Rigsters here, back with another episode of Forza Horizon 5, based on a poll that I did last week on what car you wanted to see me cover next, and also as an experiment. I decided to cover the 1985 Toyota Sprinter Tureo GT Apex. Now this car, in particular, was very popularized by the anime Initial D, which also had some song cameo appearances from Doughnut Media's Pop Up and Down Headlights, and from Eurobeat in particular, Deja Vu and Steppin' on the Gas. Yeah, it's some funky tunes, but they're pretty interesting and cool. Now, unlike the other videos that I've done before this one, I'm going to be doing a drift tune on this particular Corolla. But first, I'm going to do a drift in stock D-Class configuration. And it actually doesn't drive too bad for a Class D car. I mean, it's very controllable. It's rear-wheel drive of a screaming inline 4 that I believe it makes only like 100-some horsepower. Let's see what it actually makes. Yeah, 128 horsepower, 110 foot-pounds of torque, but weighs 2,094 pounds. That is very lightweight for a car in the 1980s, especially. And it just looks nice, too. It even has pop-up and down headlights, hence why it was featured on pop-up and down headlights. So with that, go into the interior and start drifting. Now drifting, at least in Forza, is not something I usually do very often. And as you can see, it's a little trickier to do inside the cabin. And here's like an enhanced shot for YouTube, just to show you what the tacks and gauges and all that stuff looks like. I don't expect this to score really well, and I probably should just go to the outside so I can actually see what I'm doing. Just wanted to take this out for a spin to see how it would do in stock configuration. And apparently, the game thinks I want to do an arcade right in the middle while I'm drifting. Like, no. Well, you can't make this stuff up, folks. A Horizon arcade event while drifting in a D-Class car. So, the one thing in drifting, at least in general, is most of the time, if you want to do it more realistic, you restrict yourself to rear-wheel drive cars. You can, at least in the game. I've not really found evidence or proof yet that you can do this with all-wheel drive with a rear-biased tune in real life, but in the game, you can actually drift all-wheel drive cars. I don't know why, but you can. Oh gosh, this is going to be an abysmal score. At least because I can barely get it to 30. And 30 in this game, just like in Horizon 4, is like really the bare minimum you need to break traction. But it's not doing too bad, but it could be better. I just wanted to take it up the mountain in D-Class configuration, and as I just get blown past by a Dodge Viper, going God knows how fast. Significantly faster, the spoiler. It's just, you know, it's a nice car. And I'll silence myself for a little bit, just so you can hear the stock engine bump. This is kind of what it looks like in the tab, doing these weird snaking drifts. I have to like be in first gear almost just to get this car to break traction. As you can tell, in stock configuration, at least in this game, it doesn't have a whole lot of power to work with, so you really have to rely on momentum and angle. So, the one other thing with drifting is you have to be brave in this game and turn off a lot of assist. I don't know how long it takes to climb up a mountain at 40 miles an hour drifting, but I can assure you though that this car is, at least in stock configuration, it's not going to get you the most points going up the hill. Matter of fact, I may actually consider abandoning the run, but I always want to see what kind of points you can get out of it, so it would be a fair comparison for when you actually tune it for drifting. So in the interest of science, I'm actually going to keep going. It's going to be a long one though. Holy moly. Let's see if I can get a little more speed. Yeah, there we go. So a little more speed. I would normally shift into third gear, but since it makes most of its power at the top end, I'm afraid it's just going to stall out, and I won't be able to drift it out. Alright, let's try doing third gear. Oh gosh. Unrealistic downshift while drifting. Yeah. Oh god, I still have 1.8 miles to go. Yeah, drifting in this game is not normally an activity I do too often. I mean, it is fun though, and I know some players I talk to and discuss with are really, really good at it. I mean, they drift so well you think they should be like an actual sport of Formula Drift. That's like the current drifting sport I'm aware of that has a really big following and a championship. They obviously are not doing it in cars this slow. You can't do that in real life, just like in this game. You can actually drift. Okay, car this slow. It's all about control, really, than the raw speed. It does control really well, actually. Oh my. I mean, it's not doing too bad. I mean, it's not great points-wise. You can definitely get a lot more out of this car. But with the stock tune, it's actually not doing too bad. It's very controllable. It's very slow though, as you can see. It's only drifting at like 45 miles an hour. And there's a Bronco that speeds by. Oh no. Come on, get back on the track. Luckily, the game is forgiving if you're not too far out of the drift zone. But that was pretty close. Go any further out and your points will be invalidated, so it won't even register. Now obviously, I have done this before in a different car. We got way more points because they optimized it for what I'm going to show you. At least for this particular car. There. Alright. So 279,000 points. That is the score I did. Is 279 is the score to beat. So I'll see you at the garage. So now we're in the garage here. So the first thing you want to do for a drift tune, platform and handling. Brakes. You want to get the brakes to be tunable. So obviously, you slap on brakes. The reason why you want to do that? Well, you want to be able to upset the balance so you allow for more of a slide when you tap the brakes because it causes weight transfer. And if you set it up right, you could get some really crazy slides that you still have control over. So that's why you want to do that. Springs. Pretty easy to tell. You put on drift springs. You don't do rally springs, you do drift springs. The difference is a lot. Not rally, drift. See the difference? Get the drift? Alright, well, anyways. Roll bars, very important. That ties the side-to-side twist of your car. You want that for both the front and the rear. Weight reduction, well, it doesn't matter what class your car ends up being in, because for this kind of freestyle drift, it doesn't matter what class you want to put it in. But it's good to note that if you are going to restrict by class, that this will, of course, add a ton more points, except it won't weigh a lot. It actually reduces the weight from 2,061 to 1,747, which is really good. Next thing, tires. Now, there's two schools of thought here with the tires. Believe it or not, on higher horsepower builds, in some cases, it's actually better to put on grippy semi-slick tires than drift tire compound. They actually look very similar too on the sides here. If you look at the sidewalls, they don't really change that much. This is semi-slick. That's drift. I think yeah, you see, it's a little hard to tell, but right around where my mouse is, right here, if you look very closely, the semi-slick is like this, and the drift compound is like this. Now you might be saying, well, just slap drift tire compound on. Well, the problem is, with some cars and builds, I've noticed that the drift tire compound almost works too well, in the fact that you slide so much that it's hard to get straight line speed, which you need a little bit of so you can actually start drifting the car. So it's like a catch-22, but in this case, I'm going to do drift tire compound. Now, increasing the diameter of the wheel, on the front particularly, because that's where most of the turning is going to be. I haven't really played around with higher than 215s. I am going to experiment and do 235s, but usually when you start these kind of drift tunes, you want to do the one just below maximum for the front to test with, and you find you're still not getting enough grip or slip, then increase it to maximum. The rear is pretty important as well, but too much of it might not allow you to slide. So just in the interest of science, I'm going to do 255s instead of the 235s I did the last time I did it off camera 2 weeks ago. Do that there. And track width, I'm going to do maximum. And same thing for the front. That'll allow for more turning angles and such. Drivetrain, yes. Differential is the most important one. I didn't really notice too much of a difference between race and drift differential, except for the default acceleration and deceleration. But I would advise, at least for now, if it says drift, start with that and then tweak it from there. Drive one, of course, you want to reduce weight. Nothing else said there. And you don't really need a race clutch. You could get away with a sport because you're not going to be shifting too often. But just because it's my preference, I always put in the race clutch. Transmission, very important. You want to be able to tune all your gears, so race transmission is the way to go. You don't want too many gears because if you want to be more realistic, you're not constantly changing gears while drifting in real life. But you could, for memes, you could put a 10 speed in and call it a day and just go low the whole time. You could do that, but I wouldn't advise it. Race transmission it is. The last part, power. Well, this is pretty straightforward. You just slap on everything you want. Especially the camshafts. The camshafts is probably the most important upgrade because that gives you more RPM range to play with. That is probably the most important upgrade you can do to a drift car. Followed by pistons, because that reduces weight and increases power. Flywheel can be saved for last, but I'm going to put it on anyways. Valves also can help too. That's probably another one you can go for. Displacement, well, it's just more power, so just slap it in there. It's pretty straightforward from here. Everything to maximum. Ignition maximum, intake maximum, manifold maximum, fuel system maximum. Ah, yes. Last thing, oil cooling. Now, there's two schools of thought here. You can do for 9 horsepower a slightly more, power, but instead of having like 1,684 to push, you now have 1,695. So without a turbo or forced induction, I'm gonna keep that stock. Just for drifting reasons, you want less weight as much as possible when it comes to these kind of builds. Alright. Oh, an aero. Yes. The only thing worth investing in for aero, if the car actually benefits from it, and I think it actually makes it look nicer in this car's build, reducing the drag just a smidge. I know it's not really, you're not really going faster than say 70 miles an hour most of the time, but for some cars, this actually does help, even though it slightly increases the weight. I actually think it looks nicer with the Origin Lab street side skirts. It actually makes it look nicer, so I'm going to put that on there. Helps a little bit of drag, but it's not really a big thing. Now, you could also reduce the weight by putting this very hard to see front hood bumper, if I get the camera to here. That also reduces the weight. I'm going to put that on because, 4 pounds less, and it doesn't look bad with it. This, no. And increases the weight. Although, it does actually kind of look cool for racing, but then the car starts looking like rice. And I don't necessarily always approve of rice, the look, but that actually isn't too bad. Keep that stock. You could also put on a wing. I don't think that's really necessary. And the front bumper, of course, you can get like street bumpers for this car. Some of them actually look pretty cool though. Like, let's see here. This one, that actually looks pretty cool, but that increases weight. Or you can have the adjustable Forza bumper. Keep it stock. And all that parts go from 128 horsepower to 324 and 0.4 more lateral Gs and a lot less weight. Alright, so before I head out there, I'm going to do some quick tunes here. So first thing you want to do is gear your box towards acceleration. Probably a good rule of thumb with the lower horsepower cars is probably to start off with like say 430 final drive. It's really dependent on your engine and how often you want to shift or how much gears you want to burn through to get to speed, because you will be sliding a lot. I think if I tune them just a smidge towards acceleration here, like so, like that, just to start off with will probably be fine. You don't have to worry about top speed. You're not going to be going anywhere fast. Alignment is very critical. I would recommend starting with max caster. With the drift springs, you go from 6 to 7. This really helps with turn-in and slip angles. You want to keep that on the high side. Now, for preference reasons, you can actually get away with going a slightly lower, like say 6 degrees, if you want to, but you really don't want to go much lower than 5. Some people actually have drifted as low as 5 degrees, which is pretty nuts, because that's really mostly for straight line stability after that point. Camber, by default the game starts at -5 for the front, so that way they cup inwards more, so they're more prone to sliding. I'm going to keep that there. Roll bars are fine. You will have to play around with these, depending on preference. The springs, yeah. Maximum low is really risky, because you hit the bump stops and your car gets upset if you hit a pebble, and your car just goes flying because you hit a pebble with the car basically grounded to the ground like a Toyota Camry. So I would recommend start off with raise that by 0.2. I don't know why the default springs put you at maximum low to begin with. I mean, yeah, it helps with cornering, but there's no point in having it so low that if you hit a pebble, the car's gonna vibrate itself apart, you know? Dampening's fine, although playing around with this also can help. With skip aero, because we don't need aerodynamics going slower than 80 miles an hour. Brakes are very important. Now, since I use ABS, this doesn't really matter as much, but I do recommend turning up the brake pressure by, like, say, 20%, even if you have ABS. That way it locks the wheels even quicker, although it does give you a chance to skid more often. And find the brakes towards the front by 15%. The reason being that this game does the opposite. Just like in 4, if you put the brakes towards the front, that actually is putting pressure towards the back. Don't ask me why. I think that's kind of dumb, but that's how the game works. And last but not least, differential. Now, you definitely want under acceleration. You want the differential to lock up under acceleration to a point. I mean, you don't want it to be too high, but you don't want it to be too low. So I'm going to actually start this off at 75. And for deceleration, I'm going to keep that at default 0. For drifting, you don't want it to immediately give you traction as soon as you let off the gas, because you control the car with your power more often than not, and steer at the same time. You have this lock up when you let off the gas. It will straighten itself out when you don't want to. There you go. So I'm going to go to that same event, and I'll see you there. We're going to just drift up the mountain just to show you the difference of when you tune it for drift versus what it originally started with. So away we go. Now, as you can tell, because we have a lot more power and tires that are actually made for drifting, you should immediately notice that the car is sliding a lot more, almost too much more, in fact, as I watched that turn. I hit too much brakes is what happened there. And that can happen a lot too. Just trying to get a little bit of a better grip here. Ah, there we go. So, as you notice, if you make your gears too short, you might, do stuff like that, for example. I may have made fifth a little bit too tall, but it has enough torque to keep going. For a little bit. There you go. So, I'm not really a good drifter, as you can tell. Oh god. Yeah, so sometimes you'll spin out a lot more often with the drift tires, which is why I may actually go back to semi-slicks when I do decide to drift in this car. Because it's almost like you're losing too much grip through the turns, and I don't have any opportunity to correct it. There we go. Significantly better control, and I'm doing it faster too. So there is some point to having some speed around these drifts. Oh, this is, well, that's a good drift. So I botched it there and overcorrected it. But as you can tell, as I'm just having it stuck in 4th gear, pretty much. And that's fine. You have to be really gentle with gas, I've noticed, when you do these kind of drifts. Let's try 5th gear. Do a 5th gear drift. Yeah. 5th gear's too tall. I have to keep it in 4th gear, or make 4th gear just a smidge taller. what a difference an extra 200 horsepower and 300 pounds lighter car can do around a drift course. Because YouTube is very testy about sounds and audio, you can insert your own initial D fantasy right now. It's just fun though. This car is really fun to drift, and I would recommend this car for drifting, just like in the anime. In real life, these cars were drifted quite a lot back in the day when it was new. I still think they're used now, actually, but you won't see as many because they're so rare now. They were imported to the United States under the gray market as well. Gray market meaning that if you have like a limited production car, under certain rules and regulations, you can actually, after 25 years, import cars like this legally. So obviously, do the paperwork. It's pretty cool. That I've seen a lot of cool rides and stuff over the years, people doing stuff like that. We're almost at 600. Oh, 666,000. Can I drift more, please? No, much better. That would have been a weird score to end on. Actually, now that I think about it, I might just keep the drift tires on because I'm starting to get the hang of these longer drifts. You have to be so careful with the gas. There we go. Much better. So we went from 287,000 to 763,000. So that does it for this video on the Toyota Sprinter Tureo GT Apex from 1985. Hope you enjoyed this video. The one last thing I would like to say is I'm very appreciative of whoever or whatever community or people have seen the Rigera video that I did on Taming the Beast. I never expected to have that one take off, but I'm very appreciative of all the views and likes and comments, as usual. You know, just do the usual thing. So, with that in mind, this is Rigsters Journey, signing off.